Life Stories. Today, we bring you a powerful tale of love, betrayal, and self-realization. Imagine planning the perfect anniversary dinner, only to have your celebration interrupted by something far more painful than a mere phone call. In this story, a woman confronts years of emotional neglect and the growing distance between her and her husband, all because of the overwhelming influence of his mother. As tension rises, she makes a life-changing decision that will forever alter their relationship. Stay tuned to discover how one woman takes control of her life and walks away from a marriage she no longer recognizes. Please subscribe to our channel to begin today's story. I had spent weeks planning it. The perfect anniversary dinner. 5 years of marriage, an occasion that deserved something special. I carefully selected a restaurant in downtown New York City, one that my husband, Jake, and I had always wanted to try but had never gotten around to. It wasn't just any place. It was elegant, intimate, and the kind of setting where you could let the world slip away for a few hours. A place where we could sit and reminisce about the years we'd spent together. Savor the meal, and celebrate everything we had built. The dress I wore was something I had saved for a special day. A deep red number that I knew would make Jake smile when he saw me in it. I had picked out a gift I knew he would appreciate. Something he had mentioned in passing months ago, and I made sure everything was perfect. I was excited not just for the dinner, but for the chance to reconnect. To remind ourselves of the bond that brought us together all those years ago. But of course, things rarely go according to plan. As soon as we were seated, Jake's phone buzzed. I tried to brush it off, assuming it was a work message or a random text, but then it buzzed again, and again, and again. By the time the appetizers arrived, his phone had gone off 17 times. I could feel my irritation creeping in, but I tried to stay composed. After all, this was our night, our celebration. Surely, whatever was happening could wait. Jake, however, was unfazed. He didn't even glance at me when he picked up the phone again, as though the constant interruptions were the most normal thing in the world. My frustration began to build. I had put so much effort into this evening, and here he was, more interested in whatever his mother had to say than in me. In us, in the celebration we were supposed to be having. "Are you going to ignore that?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the rising tension in my chest. Jake barely looked up. "She probably just needs something," he said dismissively, his voice casual, like the situation didn't matter. I set my fork down and leaned back in my chair, trying to remain calm. "Jake, we're at our anniversary dinner. Can it wait?" He laughed, but it wasn't a reassuring laugh. It wasn't the kind of laugh that made you feel like everything was fine. No, it was the kind of laugh that made me feel small, as if I were the one being ridiculous for caring. "She's more important than a meal," he said, shaking his head as though I were the crazy one. A wave of emotion washed over me, hurt, anger, and, beneath it all, a deep sense of betrayal. This wasn't just about a few phone calls. This was about the years of putting up with his mother's intrusion into our lives. But I didn't say anything. Instead, I smiled, but it wasn't a smile of affection. It was the kind of smile you wear when you know something the other person doesn't. A smile that says, "You don't realize what's coming, but you will soon enough." I reached into my purse and pulled out a neatly folded piece of paper. I slid it across the table toward him without saying a word. Jake blinked, surprised, and then hesitated before picking it up. The color drained from his face as he unfolded the paper. His eyes widened in disbelief as he read what was in front of him. "What is this?" he asked, his voice suddenly quiet, like he was trying to process the situation. I took a sip of my wine, savoring the moment, the quiet stillness before the storm. "Divorce papers," I said softly, letting the weight of my words settle between us. Jake's expression shifted from confusion to panic. The man who had always been so confident, so sure of himself, was suddenly shaken to his core. He looked at me, then back at the papers, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was reading. This wasn't about a few phone calls. If it were just that, I wouldn't be sitting here, watching my soon-to-be ex-husband panic over a legal document. No, this was about years of putting up with his mother's behavior, her constant interference, her uninvited visits, her ability to make me feel like I was an afterthought in my own marriage. I had respected the bond they shared at first, but over time, it had become clear that there was no room for me in their relationship. It was always about her. Always about what she needed, when she needed it, and Jake had always let her dictate the terms of our lives. This wasn't just a meal. It wasn't just a few phone calls. It was about a pattern that had gone on for too long, and I had finally had enough. As I sat there, watching Jake struggle to find the words, I realized that it wasn't just him who had been blind to what was happening. I had been too. I had allowed myself to live in the shadow of his mother's presence in our lives, telling myself that it would get better, that things would change. But they hadn't. And that night, on our anniversary, I finally faced the truth. I wasn't going to let it continue. As the silence stretched between us, I knew that this moment of truth would change everything. And, in a way, it already had. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. Jake's nonchalant response hit me harder than I anticipated. It wasn't just his words, but the way he said them. The tone in his voice, like it was completely normal for his mother to have such a hold over him, over our marriage. I couldn't ignore it anymore. This wasn't just a simple misunderstanding or a one-time mistake. It was something much deeper, something that had been festering beneath the surface for years. I looked at him, his face still lit up by the glow of his phone screen, fingers swiping casually as he scrolled through the messages. The reality of it all hit me hard. I had spent years, literally years, making excuses for his mother. I'd told myself she was just being protective, that it was normal for him to be close to his family. But this felt different. This was about more than just affectionate, was about control. And somehow, I had let it go on for far too long. I smiled, but it wasn't a smile of amusement. It was something colder, something tinged with a realization I hadn't wanted to face. "Oh, don't worry," I said, my voice steady. "She'll be seeing a lot more of you soon." Jake looked up, a frown forming on his face. He didn't get it. He didn't understand. Not yet anyway. But then, as he sat there, still looking at his phone, I reached into my purse. My fingers brushed the edges of a neatly folded document. I had been holding on to it for hours now, unsure when or how I would reveal it, but I knew the time had come. I slid it across the table in front of him, watching as he hesitated before picking it up. His eyes were still focused on the paper in his hands when he unfolded it. I could see the color drain from his face as he registered the words on the page. "What is this?" His voice faltered slightly, and for the first time in the evening, I saw a crack in his composure. I took a sip of my wine, savoring the moment, the quiet triumph that was slowly starting to settle in. The paper wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a moment of clarity, a tangible reminder of all the frustration and pain I had carried with me over the years. It was a copy of the divorce papers I had filed that very morning. His gaze snapped back to me, wide-eyed and filled with disbelief. "Divorce," he whispered, as though he couldn't quite wrap his mind around the reality of it. What are you talking about?" I didn't answer him right away. I needed him to fully absorb what was happening, to understand the weight of the decision I had made. This wasn't just about the phone calls during dinner or his mother's constant interference. It wasn't about one evening or one event. This was about the years of feeling neglected, dismissed, and unimportant. It was about the constant undermining of our relationship, the way his mother had inserted herself into every corner of our lives, and how Jake, time and time again, had chosen her over me. For years, I had swallowed my frustration, telling myself that I could handle it, that I could be the bigger person. But it wasn't enough. Jake's indifference to our anniversary, to our marriage, and to my feelings, was the final straw. The distance between us had been growing for a while, and tonight, in the midst of what should have been a celebration, I realized I couldn't pretend any longer. Jake's face was pale now, his hand trembling as he stared at the divorce papers in front of him. He looked up at me, as if searching for some sign that this was a mistake, that there was some way out of the situation. But there was nothing left to say. I had made my choice, and it had taken me a long time to get here. I couldn't help but wonder if he ever truly saw if he ever understood how much I had given, how much I had tried to make our marriage work. Even when his mother had made it so difficult. But in that moment, I knew the answer. He hadn't, and it was time for me to stop pretending. Jake's shock was palpable, his eyes scanning the divorce papers again, as if he could find some mistake or misunderstanding that would make them disappear. But there was no mistake. This was the reality, one I had been hiding for far too long. The years of frustration, of watching my husband prioritize his mother over our relationship, had built up to this moment. He was a man who, in many ways, was still tethered to the apron strings of his childhood, and I had allowed it to happen. But it wasn't just about the calls or the constant intrusions. It was the years of living in the shadow of his mother's control. I had tolerated so much, convincing myself that things would get better. I had tried to be patient, to give him space to figure it out on his own. But somewhere along the way, I had lost myself in the process. The woman who stood before him now was not the same person who had walked into this marriage 5 years ago. The dream of building a life together had been replaced by the harsh reality of living in a marriage where I came second to his mother. Time and time again. Why? Why now? Jake's voice cracked, his eyes pleading for an explanation he wasn't ready to hear. I could feel my heartache as I looked at him. This wasn't easy for me. In many ways, this was the hardest decision I had ever made. But it was also the only decision that made sense. Jake, I began, my voice soft but firm. This isn't just about a few phone calls. It's about years of being ignored, years of feeling like I don't matter. I paused, searching his face for some sign of understanding, but all I saw was confusion and hurt. I could feel my own frustration rising again, but I knew I needed to stay calm. He had to hear me, had to understand why I had come to this point. Your mother has been a part of everything, I continued, my words coming out more quickly now. She has a key to our house, Jake. She lets herself in whenever she wants, without so much as a word. Do you remember the time we were supposed to spend the weekend alone? We had planned it for weeks, but she showed up, unannounced, just to check in. You didn't even bat an eye. You just let her in, like it was no big deal. The pain in my voice was unmistakable, but Jake still didn't seem to fully grasp the weight of what I was saying. It wasn't just one incident. It was the accumulation of everything. The way he allowed his mother to invade every corner of our lives without ever considering how it made me feel. The way he would rush to her side at the slightest inconvenience, no matter what plans we had. The way he would defend her actions, as though she could do no wrong. I've been patient, I said, my voice steady now, though the words stung. I've let it go for so long. Thinking that one day, you would see it. I thought that if I just gave you time, you would figure it out, that you would choose me, choose us. But instead, it's always been her. Always, and I can't keep doing this. I deserve more than this. His face, once filled with confusion, was now a mix of guilt and realization. I could see it in his eyes, the shift, the understanding that this was not just about the phone calls or his mother's neediness. This was about the deeper, more painful issue of him choosing her over me, over our marriage, time and time again. Please, don't do this, Jake pleaded, his voice trembling. I don't want to lose you. I looked at him, a mix of sadness and finality settling in my chest. I didn't want this either, Jake, but I can't keep being the afterthought in our marriage. I can't keep coming second to her. I've given all I can, and I'm done. The silence between us was thick with unspoken words. with the weight of everything that had led to this moment. And as I sat there, watching the man I once loved struggle to grasp the consequences of his actions, I knew I had made the right choice, even though it broke my heart to see it come to this. We had reached the end of our road, and there was no going back. As the silence stretched between us, I could see the realization beginning to set in. Jake's face had lost all its color, his usual confidence replaced with a look of raw vulnerability. He had never seen me like this before, strong, resolute, and unwilling to compromise any longer. "Are you really done?" he asked softly, his voice tinged with disbelief. I nodded, my heart heavy but certain. "I am." It wasn't just the calls or the intrusions. It was the years of neglecting my feelings, the years of sacrificing my happiness for the sake of keeping the peace. I had given him every chance to see what was happening, to recognize how his actions were affecting our relationship. But now, sitting across from him, I knew it was time to let go. I couldn't keep living in the shadows of his mother's presence, never fully seen or valued. Maybe you'll see this differently one day," I said, my voice quieter now. "But I can't keep waiting for that day to come. I need more than what this has been." I stood up, smoothing the fabric of my dress, feeling a strange mix of sadness and liberation. "I hope one day you understand," I added, my eyes meeting his for the last time that night. I walked away, leaving behind a marriage that had once promised so much. But as I stepped into the cool New York night, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. I was finally free to live my life on my own terms. And so, this chapter ended, but the story of my life was just beginning again. Thank you for listening to this life story. Please subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking stories and real-life experiences.